Hey everybody, it's Curse, and today I'm going to bless you with a Necromancer Flame Wraith build guide. So this build is hands down phenomenal. It wipes the floor with Julra under 10 seconds easily. It's incredibly tanky, and better yet, you don't even need to be tanky because your Flame Wraiths kill enemies from like 2 screens away if you're running monos. And this is why people can push 1000 plus corruption on this build. It is incredibly strong. Oh, and there's a bug that lets you kill Julra in under 1 second if you utilize it. So if you feel like spicing up your last Epoch experience with a little bit of tower defense, no, not that kind of tower defense, come on. But yeah, if you're in the mood for that, you should give this build a try. And having said all that, I think it's pretty obvious this is not my build. There are many other build guides for this build, and over the years, lots of people have contributed to making this build what it is today. My contribution would be minimal with this video. However, I do wish to add it to my tier list so that I can gauge exactly how powerful it is, because people have been convincing me to try it out for a very long time. And oh boy, am I glad that I did. Special shout out to Toro Brillante, who kept bugging me to try it out and sharing lots of intel on it with me. He's been pushing it to something like 1000, 1100 corruption. So if you want to see how this build pushes super high corruption, check out his Twitch. Anyway, let's check it out. Irashaimase! So let me highlight for you what makes this build so incredibly strong. Let's start with the skills, and particularly we'll start with Summon Wraith, our only damage source. The node Locus of Death converts this build from a minion build to our tower defense build, because by taking it, wraiths cannot move, as you see right there in red, and they get a ton more damage. But yeah, because of the fact that they don't move, they don't need to worry about how close they are to our hero, whether they've gone too far, because playing with other minions, you probably would have noticed that if they get too far away from you, they kind of start rubber banding back to you and they lose track of their targets. It's incredibly annoying. With this node, they only have one purpose: find enemy, kill enemy. And they do it really well. The extra damage certainly helps. And so you have to be running this node for this build to be as effective as it is. Next, you really want to put 1 point in Flame Wraith just to activate your Flame Wraiths, as they are more powerful than Putrid Wraiths. And then you want to get your 6% critical strike chance. The crit damage leech doesn't hurt either. And a 90% crit multi. Like, all of these nodes are phenomenal. So make sure to max them after you've gotten this one and Flame Wraiths. That is the order you want to go. And then afterwards, summoning cast speed and mana efficiencies is really nice, just because they're a little bit pricey from a mana perspective. Reducing their health decay makes them a little bit tankier, just so they don't die too easily. And then extra damage in these two nodes is where I would dump the rest of my skill points in. But yeah, you can take away from any of these 3 nodes if you don't have 23 points in the skill, as I do. If you happen to have a lot of extra points, Haunting doesn't hurt, extra health. But even with this setup and 40% summoning mana efficiency, Summon Wraiths still cost 18 mana. And that is not sustainable unless you run Drain Life. And so that is the purpose of Drain Life, is to sustain your Flame Wraiths. And we do that by taking Hecatomb, sure, whatever, and which gives us mana gain per second, and it allows us to target our own minions. And so we're perpetually draining the life of our Flame Wraiths just to get our mana back. It also heals us if you take Necrotic Feast. This node is not a must-have, but I like it. The extra health leech is nice, especially when you're running certain items that prevent you from regenerating life. Next, you really need to get Dark Shackles so that the skill is no longer channeled but is instead cast. That is going to dramatically increase the mana cost of the skill, plus 60 as you can see. And also we want to increase the duration by 2 seconds, because the base duration is 3. And so you can see for 5 mana, we can increase it by 1 second, which is a 1/3 increase from the base duration of 3 seconds. And the mana cost increase is actually fairly minimal compared to that 1/3 increase in duration. So make sure to max out Enduring Night as well. And then next, you want to get into Contempt and Enduring Contempt. This is another reason why this build is so ridiculously strong. Basically, by running Contempt and making sure that you have Flame Wraiths underneath your drain life every now and then, you're getting a free 50% all res and 50% more armor. It is absolutely insane. Getting 50% all res for free means most of your suffixes on your items are free to pump up life into them. And this is why this build gets so tanky. You can basically itemize every single suffix almost into health. So make sure to get Contempt, and then 2, maybe 3, or maybe 4 if you find yourself losing that Contempt duration frequently. But I personally find that 2 points in Enduring Contempt is enough. And finally, if you have extra points, dump them into Thought Steal. Just because that channel cost minus 30% also applies to the mana cost when it's in its non-channeling version. So you can see I've brought it down to 66. And that is how we sustain the mana for Flame Wraith. Next, Teleport is pretty standard. This is our mobility skill. It's our repositioning skill, just to make sure that we can get out of trouble. The only node that I would highlight a little bit is Violent Emergence. It insta-kills bosses when they hit that 15% threshold. That's super nice. And then, yeah, you want to be running the usual Haste and Frenzy. You want to reduce the cooldown and improve the cast speed, and get some bone armor for defensive purposes. And then next is Abomination together with Dreadshade. Basically, every single Necromancer minion build needs to be running Dreadshade. And this is no exception. And it's just a matter of the best way to be running Dreadshade, because we're going to be recasting Flame Wraiths all the time and they don't move. And so it's kind of hard to keep your Dreadshade on top of them if you don't opt for Spectral Distance. Some 5-head gamers invented the Assemble Abomination, essentially buff totem, to combine with Dreadshade and this Spectral Distance in order to constantly buff your Flame Wraiths for a 40-second duration until Dreadshade expires, essentially. So anyway, so let's just quickly go over the skills here. You want to be running Lingering Doom and then Spectral Distance on top of the static minion, in this case, which is going to be Assemble Abomination, and Lone Watcher for increased shade duration from 20 to 40, increased cast speed for our shades, and then extra damage. And if you are affected by Aura, Symbiotic Apparition here, it's really powerful because you get extra cast speed, but more importantly, you also get armor per vitality, which scales beyond that 25 armor per vitality thanks to Flesh Harvest. It is a really good way to improve the tankiness of your hero if you can stack enough vitality. And then Assemble Abomination, not much to talk about here. You want to get Stationary right here in Imprisoned Horror, just to make sure your Assembled Abomination stays in one place, and then you can cast Dreadshade on it, where it buffs minions not inside the area. And so as you move away from your Abomination, every single minion is going to have Dreadshade on it. You also want to get Age of Undeath, just to make sure that your Abom doesn't die. It's basically going to remain at like 0 HP and keep buffing everybody really, really well thanks to Flesh Harvest. The other nodes don't really matter as much. You can kind of do almost whatever you want with them, but thanks to Toro, I realized that you don't really need the health decay reduction, because it slows down the amount of time needed to reach the maximum Flesh Harvest potential. So try to avoid these two nodes. So those are the skills. Now let me just quickly demonstrate to you how good Flesh Harvest is. Let's check out the crit damage from a single Flame Wraith with Dreadshade, but on a maxed health Assemble Abomination. Let's check it out. So yeah, you can see 60k, 50k, 60, yeah, about 55 to 70k crits. Okay, so now that the health of our Abom is almost 0, we can recast Dreadshade and see what kind of damage we do. And yeah, the damage is something like 120 to 150k, which is essentially double damage. So by having an Abom at 0 HP with a Dreadshade on it, we're doubling the damage compared to an Abom at max HP. And that is all thanks to the Flesh Harvest node right here. So make sure to max it out. It also gives you more cast speed on the Wraith, on yourself. It doubles the armor per vitality that you're getting. So it is just a really, really good synergy. So a really good tech to be using. And yeah, that's it for the skills section. And now let's check out the items. The only item that I would say is core for this particular build is the staff. Everything else is not necessarily a must-have item. You can run without any of the other items and you can just itemize slightly differently. But you gotta have this staff. It significantly increases the number of maximum wraiths that you can have. I think that is the strongest element of this staff. It basically takes you from like 5 to 15, let's say roughly. So it almost triples it. It gives you skill points in your summon wraith skill. A little bit of mana regen, a little bit of minion damage, doesn't hurt. And then it also says minions lose 6% of their current health per second. And that's actually a benefit for our abomination because it allows it to go to 0 HP so that we can get the flesh harvest buff even earlier. And not only that, but the effective level for legendary potential of this staff is also pretty low. So you can easily get like LP 1, 2, or 3. And then the affixes you want in those LP sockets are only 2 really. Increased minion spell damage, you want tier 7 of that. And you want cast speed. If you can land those 2, you're good. You can see that I'm missing cast speed and I don't even have tier 7 minion spell damage. But it still does the job. So that's the one core item. Next, for semi-core items, you really want to be running a Revenant Mask for the plus minion spell damage. That implicit is very strong. It increases your DPS significantly. You want to be running in the prefixes minion critical strike chance just to ensure that you hit max crit with your Flame Wraith. And then you don't really need int. I would switch the int to vitality. And honestly, my suffixes are not that great either. I would switch those up to HP. Another semi-core item is Julra's gloves. And that is for the plus 10 spell damage for the minions. Ideally, you want to get increased cast speed in them as well, because that applies to the Flame Wraith as well. It's super strong. I'm not wearing them right now just because they're bugged. This is how you can get like plus 500% cast speed on your Flame Wraith. And I'll demonstrate it real quick. You put them on, and then every single time you cast Flame Wraith, they get increased cast speed based on the amount of increased cast speed that you have in the gloves. And it keeps adding up over and over again. It's just ridiculous. Watch. Plus 22, plus 22, plus 22, and so on and so on. It goes away after 4 seconds or so. But if you spam enough Flame Wraiths, you can get them to have like 500% increased cast speed. And that's how you kill Julra in under 1 second. I try to play without them for the most part. I mean, every now and then I put them on just for some lulls, but yeah, this is another good option. It's just different kinds of gloves that give you cast speed, hybrid health, hopefully vitality in the prefixes, all the usual good stuff. Titan Heart is also a really good semi-core item for the build if you can get increased minion critical strike chance in the sockets for it. You can see I'm also running armor. Stacking armor for this build is really powerful because you get 50% more armor from your drain life. So once I have all my buffs, I end up with something like 10-12k armor, which is 80% damage reduction for physical damage. But yeah, Titan Heart with at least 1 or 2 LP is to me a semi-core item for the build. The 15% less damage taken while wielding a two-handed melee weapon like a staff is very useful. And then 40% increased health, phenomenal. I think Twisted Heart of Eucharos is also a really good semi-core item for the build. And in this case, we're not really running it for the ward generation. We're running it for the extra health. 20% increased health is something like a tier 7% increased health affix. 13 strength, possibly 16 strength at max, is also a tier 6 or a tier 7 strength affix, which is free armor for us. And we love running armor on this build. 13 strength is 52% armor in this case. And then cast speed. Extra cast speed doesn't hurt for this build. Just because it allows us to summon our wraiths that much faster, cast our drain life that much faster. It really enables this build quite a bit. You can see I'm running 39% increased cast speed. The 1 point extra in necrotic spells doesn't hurt. You can see we get +1 for Dreadshade and +1 for drain life. And then that extra little bit of ward is minor, but it does add a little bit of tankiness. For Amulet, you have two options really. And I'm kind of on the fence between the two of them, honestly. One option is Logi's Hunger for the plus 3% minion critical strike chance and plus 2 fire minion skills. Both of those are very nice for our Flame Wraiths. It allows us to hit 100% crit strike chance that much easier. 2 extra points in Flame Wraith. Gives us more damage as well. Not too much, but something. And then some res so that you don't have to worry about necrotic and physical resistances, because this is going to max you out with the 50% free all res from Drain Life. Death Rattle is also a good option. It adds a lot more damage, but it also makes your minions take 25 to 30% increased damage. To me, that felt like a huge sacrifice because your minions already get one shot mostly. So it's kind of frustrating that they are even squishier. If you're running super high corruption, you might want to run Death Rattle because your minions are going to be dying from one hit anyways. The 30% extra damage isn't going to make a difference. And other than that, yeah, just get a lot of armor, get a lot of health, get a lot of minion health, minion damage. And you can see my items are not super mega optimized, but it's still easy mode with this build. In terms of idols, you want to be running 2 of these adorned idols that give you Flame Wraith chance instead of the regular melee Wraith. And I like running the suffixes plus health, obviously. Minion crit strike chance is not bad either. You want to have at least 1 idol that gives you minion chance to apply mark for death on hit. I think 1 idol is enough. And then the rest is mostly just health and maxing out res. A little bit of minion fire damage and armor from the 1x1s. In terms of blessings, get plus health from the Black Sun, plus mana. This makes a huge difference, by the way. And there is no really other bonus here that you might want. The build is very mana hungry, so even this 175 mana sometimes feels like insufficient. From Reign of Dragons, I have plus 20 all res here, but that's just legacy from other Necromancer builds that I have. And I decided to keep it just because I don't want to reroll things over and over again. But I think the more optimal choice for this particular build is plus 70% critical strike avoidance. And the reason for that is we already have plus 50% all res from Drain Life. So you're not getting as much out of this one as you would in other builds. So get the 70% crit avoid. And then for the other 2 blessings, I like to run armor. You can see 63% increased armor, 303 armor. The build scales really well with armor just because of that plus 50% more armor. And now let's quickly check out the passives. In here I have even more armor, cast speed for minions and for our hero, vitality, and vitality is really strong for this build just because of that 25 armor per point of vitality. You need 5 points to unlock Drain Life in the Lich passive skill tree. And then Necromancer skill tree. This is one of the best skill trees in the entire game. Past this line right here, you know, all of these are just so good. It's hard to balance them all out. Anyway, you get your armor shred. In this case, I've opted to get these 6 points for easy health from potions, but really these 6 points are very flexible. You can get hunger, you can get more minion health here, or even more minion armor and health through this node. They're flexible. Oh, and a quick PSA on Tyrant. When it says reduced minions health, that kind of sounds like it's a minus 25% less health, but it actually is additive with the increased minion health stat right here. So it is absolutely inconsequential. Just, yeah, max this node right here because the reduced minion health doesn't do much. And now let's go over how the skill rotation works for the build. And the best way to do that is to actually go through a monolith together. So when you enter the monolith, you want to recast your Assemble Abomination as far away from all the enemies as possible. And you can drain life a little bit from it, just to make sure that Dreadshade bonus gets applied even better. Cast Dreadshade on it, and go start clearing mobs. And as you're progressing through, you want to cast your Dreadshades in the corner as far away from you as possible, just so they can start one-shotting enemies from like 2 screens away. And also as you cast them, I like to cast them 3 at a time, with a drain life following that. 3 wraiths, drain life, 3 wraiths, drain life, something like that. And the reason for that is drain life has a maximum of 3 units that it hits, and it gives you a good rhythm to play the game that way. If your dread trade expires, you can create a new album and recast it on them. I try to avoid spamming all of my shades on top of the same spot, just because it makes it easier for enemies to wipe them with a single hit if they just have some sort of nasty AoE, especially against bosses. Try to not stack your Flame Wraiths on this exact same area. If you're gonna one-shot the boss, and you know that you will, it's okay, it's not a big deal. You can stack them and just one-shot the boss. But if you're gonna have a long boss fight, you do not want them stacked. But yeah, that's pretty much the skill rotation. The only other thing I would mention is if you want to prepare for a boss, you can just kind of spam them like this, spam a bunch of drain lives underneath, and then make sure you get at least 15, 16, or whatever your max is. You can see my max 16 up here. So you want to make sure you have your maximum before you enter the boss fight. Alright, now let's go over the verdict for the build. You can see it up here in row 3. Tier 4 Julra, 8 to 15 seconds. And that is without the bug for the Julra gloves. That is obviously an S+ tier. The damage for this build is phenomenal, especially if you pre-cast and pre-buff everything. And then in terms of monoliths, and we're talking chill farming right here, I was running 650 corruption very comfortably, not dying very often, despite being a little bit too YOLO. The mobility is A+, and you can push that corruption way higher. Many people have done so already. And if you play very carefully and just cast your Flame Wraiths in the corner of your screen, you can just kill everything from 2 screens away without taking too much risk. And for that reason, the build gets an S+ tier for monoliths as well. Survivability is S+. You have max armor. You have insane amounts of health. Free 50% all res. You can't go wrong. The multiplayer utility is B. It doesn't really offer too much other than some armor shred. The cost to itemize is also very much a strong point for the build. You only need the staff. Yeah, sure, you want to get it with like 2 LP preferably, just to maximize the chance of getting the plus spell damage into it. But still, like, it is just too easy to get this build up and going. So final tier, it is an S+ build. The Julra bug is gonna get patched hopefully soon, and even without that, the build is super mega strong. And I just kind of cornered myself into having to put it at S+ tier, just because it's just better than the S tier builds that I have on this list. And that is it for the verdict and for the build guide, folks. I'll leave you with a 647 corruption monolith running in the background as we wrap things up. To summarize, this build is amazing. Great DPS, great tankiness, it's got everything. Killing enemies from 2 screens away. If you haven't tried it already, I really recommend trying it out. It's a great build. And if you enjoyed the build guide, please do like and subscribe. It really helps the channel as I work on adding more and more build guides and then adding them to my tier list as well. And if you want to see me optimize builds live, a link to my Twitch is in the description below. I'm currently in the process of respecking into a Blade Dancer build to wrap up my 100 Lagon runs. And let's get hyped, 0.9.1 is coming out on May 25th. I'm excited to see what kind of changes they're bringing on, so it should be fun. And then a week after that is Diablo 4, so it's gonna be a busy month. Once again, busy but fun. Anyways, love you all, take it easy, and go chiso sama deshita.